annual Town Day. WUS will have a bake sale and hot dog stand fundraiser from 9 to 2 with a family-friendly concert by Matt Heaton and the Outdoor Toys from 12 to 1 p.m. Helping hands are still needed, as are donated baked goods. Please see highlights for the link to the Sign Up Genius for both baking and helping on Town Day. We can especially use helpers from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. to set up tents, tables, and all the food. A pie baking party will occur Friday afternoon in Metcalf Kitchen from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Now, let us open our hearts and minds to the spirit of worship with these words.
Just a small correction. Town Day's on Saturday, not Sunday. June 1st. Be there or be square. We open our hearts and minds to the spirit of worship with these words. We come this day on the cusp of a new season. We come this day in gratitude, in sorrow, and in hope. We come together in this place as one people, a community of healing and renewal, a gathering of peace and possibility. May this hour of worship honor those who live in memory and grant us the courage and insight to create more peaceful days ahead. Come, let us worship together.
I now invite Cam and Maeve Somerville to come forward to light our chalice. To face the world's shadows, a chalice of light. To face the world's coldness, a chalice of warmth. To face the world's terrors, a chalice of courage. To face the world's turmoil, a chalice of peace. May its glow fill our spirits, our hearts, and our lives. Rise in body, rise in spirit, to join in singing our opening hymn. I'm going to lay down my sword and shield. The words are printed in your order of service and will appear on the live stream screen.
I'd like to invite those who are young and young at heart to come forward. Good morning. Come on up. So, tomorrow is Memorial Day, when we take time to honor people who have fought in wars for our country. It's also a day to remind ourselves that we should work for peace in the world, so nobody has to go to war. You may wonder why we still have war. Everyone knows that fighting isn't a good idea, right? We hear our parents and teachers tell us not to fight with our siblings or our friends. Lots of religions tell us to treat others as we would like to be treated. And still, we have wars in the world. Have you ever wondered about that? Why is it so hard not to fight? I mean, I fought with my siblings, my friends, and even my parents when I was young, and, older too. Have you ever fought with your friends or your siblings or your parents? Yeah? Yes? Yeah, I see. How about, nobody out there fights with their parents or their siblings. Oh, wait, I see a few hands now. Okay. You did this morning. Excellent. Okay, so now we have a very good case. Thank you, Ira, for being our test case. So one reason I think it's hard not to fight is lasagna feelings. Now, I don't mean how you feel about lasagna. That's not what I mean by lasagna feelings. Has everyone eaten lasagna before? Does everybody know what lasagna is? It's like noodle layers with cheese and sauce and maybe some veggies in between, right? Okay, so everybody knows what lasagna is, but I want to talk about lasagna feelings. Lasagna feelings are feelings that pile on top of each other, like layers in a lasagna. So why do we fight? What's the feeling that we're feeling when we feel like we want to fight with someone? What is that feeling that we feel? Anger, right, anger. We feel angry. Anger is the top layer of our lasagna. It's an easy feeling to feel in some ways, right? It's easy because it makes you feel all fired up, right? And makes you feel like you want to do something, like fight, right? It's kind of an easy feeling to feel. But underneath that anger, though, is another feeling. No, but that's close. The one that I'm thinking of is a feeling it's not as easy to feel. That feeling is fear. Fear can be hard to identify when we're feeling it, right? That's partly why it's so easy to feel anger, because fear leads to anger, right? It's the feeling underneath anger is fear, right? But fear isn't at the bottom of our lasagna. Underneath fear is hurt. Have you ever felt hurt by something someone has done to you? Yeah? Like what? What have you felt? Timothy, what have you felt? Yeah, it felt sad and scary to be hurt by someone. Yes, Ira.
It makes you feel sort of betrayed.
Yeah, betrayed, right? That hurt feeling, right? Yeah. So when we feel hurt, it makes us afraid, like Ira just said. It makes us have fear that we might not belong to the person who's hurting us. We might be alone, which is a scary idea, isn't it? That's how hurt leads us to fear. The lowest level of our lasagna, at the bottom, the biggest feeling of them all, is love. Is that surprising to you? It's kind of hard to think of it. But remember that if we don't feel some amount of love for someone, it isn't likely that we'll be hurt by them. It's weird to think that love, something that we all think of as a quote-unquote good emotion, right, a good feeling, can lead to those other lasagna layers that maybe seem like less good feelings. In truth, feelings aren't good or bad. They're just our feelings. It's just what we feel. How we act on those feelings is what matters. So the next time you or I feel angry, let's try to remember our lasagna. Let's try as hard as we can to reach down through those messy layers of cheese and sauce and fear and hurt to get to the love that we feel for the person we're thinking of fighting, for ourselves or for the world, because love is the only way to peace. Now I invite the grown-ups to sing us to religious education. The words are in your orders of service.
I need to see this. I know.
We now come to the centering time in our service, settling in body and in spirit. First through words and then ritual, kindling of the light, a time to light a candle of personal joy, sorrow, or concern, either here in the sanctuary, at the candle table, or at home. At that time, if you would like a candle brought to you, please raise your hand. As we kindle the light, I will light a candle for June Edwards, who is recovering from a stroke at Encompass Rehabilitation Center. Cards and emails to her family are welcome, but for now, no visitors, please. After we kindle the light, we'll be together in a time of shared silence, out of which we will sing hymn 169 in the gray hymnal, We Shall Overcome. We begin with a prayer by the Reverend Elizabeth Wynne. She writes, God of mercy, Spirit who makes peace out of war, who wanders with refugees and keeps vigil with children at our border and all borders. Holy healer in hospitals and shelters, at schools, in homes, at weddings, and in planes. May your love be balm for all the hurt. May your truth be present in offices of power and in the hearts of soldiers and civilians alike. Many times we've thought the arc was bending towards justice. Many times we saw it happen in courtrooms and in streets, in the hearts of people creating their own liberation. Many times we've also doubted. For those of us this morning who doubt, who despair that brokenness and suffering and war may win, remind us of the small mercies, the tiny triumphs. Hope does dwell in this world. Let us now kindle the light.
This morning's reading is by Kathleen McTeague, 10,000 Baby Names. When my youngest daughter was about 2 years old, she came across a tattered paper book on our bookshelves, 10,000 Baby Names. And for a little while, this was her favorite book. Drawn by the shining face of the baby on the cover, she brought it to me over and over again and demanded that I read through the names. This was the prelude to what was, at the time, her favorite story of all, how we chose her name. What's in a name? Always there is a story. You were named for a beloved relative, or contrarily, named after no one because your parents wanted a clean break from family history. If you were a first son and your family went in for such things, you got to be called after your father and have junior tacked on. If you were a daughter, you could be named for a virtue or aspirations such as hope, serenity, or faith. Recalling some sweet romantic setting, your parents might have named you for their favorite Spanish or Italian village. Perhaps you carry the name of one of their heroes or heroines, or more whimsically, some favorite musician or movie star. Maybe you've ended up with an affectionate nickname born of a sibling's mispronunciation or something you tried to be as an adolescent and never quite lived up to or lived down. Always there is a story. In church on Sunday mornings, we read aloud the names of the American soldiers killed each week. Alone in my study the night before, I speak each name out loud and then wonder about the stories. I imagine these soldiers as the babies they once were, held in someone's arms at a baptism or naming ceremony. The proud relatives gathered around as the name was formally bestowed, and everyone beamed as the baby cooed or wailed or fidgeted. There was so much gladness and pride in each moment of the naming, and not once did anyone imagine that the road their baby walked would end 18 or 20 years later in a mix of blood and dust halfway around the world. As part of a witness for peace on Memorial Day, a cairn of stones was built at a busy downtown intersection in Hartford, each stone bearing the name of a fallen American soldier, or one of the tens of thousands of civilians who have died in these wars. How do we choose one name from thousands to symbolize so much carnage, so much loss? I finally brought these 3 stones to the cairn, one for each of my own 3 children. Each stone bore the name of a child who had died on the birthday of one of mine. As I placed the stones, I wondered about their names. Always there is a story.
Thank you, choir. We've reached that annual rite of passage, Memorial Day weekend, the informal beginning of summer, marked by what feels like the sudden onset of heat and transition to a different way of life. This is a time for other rites of passage like graduation and June weddings and getting things done so we can be free to embrace a slower season of vacations or reading in the hammock or finding ways to cool off at the beach or the lake. For some of us, this weekend will be like every weekend, while for others, it's a time for getting away from home and getting together with friends and family, a time of community and celebration. If you think about it, though, the Memorial Day holiday is a bit of a paradox. This is a time to remember those who left their family and friends to serve their nation. Just their departure alone tears the relational fabric of community. The fortunate return, some with wounds we can see, and some with wounds we cannot. Some return with their own sense of integrity damaged or shattered, and some don't return at all, or only to town cemeteries with the mournful tune of taps played in their honor. So there's Memorial Day, the holiday, and Memorial Day, the observance, a day distant from celebration, a time to acknowledge the damage done to community, the pain suffered by those in the armed forces, and the pain suffered by all those who love them when they die as part of their service. Memorial Day is a day to pause and bear witness to the unfathomable cost of war. Perhaps because the idea of remembering each life lost through state violence is too difficult for any mind to hold, it is common to focus on individual people, those singular lives connected to place. This is true for our congregation, too. Each time we gather in our building through a plaque on our sanctuary wall, we are reminded of the lives and deaths of Malon W. Dennett, Stuart G. Lane, and Chester R. Tutane. Each time we enter the Main Street doors, the cloister windows recall the memory of Dawn Kelly Bartlett, a World War II nurse who served in Okinawa. When they first entered the world, I imagine their families did not expect their names to be honored in perpetuity in these ways. As the author of this morning's reading, Kathleen McTeague, observes, with every name, always there is a story. What was the story behind their names? What future did their families once dream for them? Recently, there was an online conversation between Unitarian Universalist clergy that moved me to think about this connection between war, place, and identity. A nearby colleague posted the following in part. The Minutemen were locals who fought the British for control of the colonies. They are historically important to our region. We're having our second Democracy Festival, and the local Minutemen reenactment chapter would like to attend and play fife and drum. I find myself with mixed feelings on this and would love your feedback. This question my colleague brought to us made me wonder about context, both the context of their event and the broader political context in which we are all living through. I wrote, as we know, the right wing claims an identity grounded in the American Revolution, the Founding Fathers, and the Constitution, even though everything they stand for counters what the revolutionaries fought for. There seems like great potential to be misunderstood with the Minutemen's presence. In contrast, another colleague posted, symbolically, the theme of collective resistance to tyranny seems worthy of reclamation in these undemocratic days. Someone else raised concern about the impact of colonization, writing that part of why the locals fought the British for control was so they could expand further into Native American territory. So the kind of democracy they symbolize may not really be the kind your event is trying to support. But yet, another colleague made an additional provocative point. I see it as an opportunity to wrestle with the question of ethical use of force in establishing and upholding democracy. I don't think the original 13 colonies would have won their independence through the strategic use of reasonable dialogue with the British. If democracy intends to lessen the influence of violence on a group process, but paradoxically, democracy also depends on violence, what is the open-eyed, ethical, and effective deployment of just enough purposeful violence to sustain democracy? Or a thought experiment, by what nonviolent means could democracy be established in the face of tyranny, such that Minutemen could be truly only ornamental? Preparing for Memorial Day, I have been sitting with this post. What has captured my attention is not really the question about how much force is necessary to sustain democracy, but more a greater recognition that for as long as I've been alive, there's not been a meaningful exploration of any nonviolent approach to ensure the health of our government, beyond those on the margins working for peace. If anything, commitment to the military has only increased. USA Facts, a not-for-profit, nonpartisan civic initiative making government data easy for all Americans to access, reports on their website that since 1980, defense spending has risen by 62%, climbing from $506 billion to $820 billion by 2023, after adjusting for inflation. In short, preparing for Memorial Day, I've been sitting with the reality that I can't imagine living in a country without a military, that war and its terrible costs are an integral part of most nations, past and present, and hence an integral part of human culture. We have the choice to pause and remember the war dead or not, but we do not have the choice to be free of war. An organized group reenacting past battle preparation is just one example of how war and violence are at the heart of collective identity, be it a region, a state, or nation. This is true for all of us and has been for countless generations. Our opening hymn, "Gonna Lay Down My Sword and Shield," predated the Civil War and gained popularity during the Vietnam War. Its pledge of refusing to study war no more derives from Scripture, Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. The longing to live in a world free of violence, absent of war, a world where Memorial Day is rendered obsolete, is that ancient and deeply rooted and still a distant dream. But war is far from distant. While we are not living through war ourselves, so many of us have been following the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Here, I need to make what feels like a confession to you. As a spiritual leader, I hold an ethical obligation to speak up and speak out when we observe our shared values violated. And the war between Israel and Hamas has rendered me silent, not because I'm not horrified by the murder and capture of Israeli citizens, not because I'm not horrified by the violence raining down on Gaza's people in retaliation and the worsening humanitarian crisis. Observing what we can euphemistically call the dialogue between supporters of Israel and Hamas, I cannot say anything against Israel amid the sickening rise of anti-Semitism, nor can I condone the suffering of the Palestinians. So I've remained silent, even though that in itself does harm. In another recent conversation between colleagues, this one in person, I resonated with what one minister said. In his town's interfaith clergy group, the members have been serving their respective houses of worship for many years. His clergy group includes more than one rabbi and more than one imam. In such a small, supportive group, the bonds of connection are deep and enduring. In this place of spiritual trust, away from their traumatized communities under siege, this has become the one safe place to mourn together. My colleague observes that in this world we are now all living in, it is impossible not to care, and it is impossible to choose a side, as both sides suffer so terribly. When will there come a day when nation shall not take up sword against nation. As I sought a quote for today's centering thought, I learned how many writers and thinkers believe that pacifism is only for the naive or symptomatic of privilege. Who are we to judge the use of force when our own survival is not at stake? Yet, because I believe in people, our worth and dignity, and our capacity to manifest change, I believe we can no longer assume that a world without violence is impossible. And so today, I resist participating in Memorial Day, not because I do not recognize and honor the profound sacrifice countless people have made throughout generations, but because I believe they should not have to have died, no matter the importance of their cause. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. This passage from Isaiah has not only inspired a song, but a movement. I have learned about an organization that, like many groups, organizes gun collection programs. However, they go one step further through literally melting the weapons down and refashioning them into gardening tools. Perhaps the closest thing we have in our lives to plowshares. They are called raw tools, and while they are separate from any nation's military, their mission of disarming hearts and forging peace brings me hope. Beyond removing weapons from our communities, Raw Tools uses the proceeds from selling the tools to support training in nonviolence, as they affirm on their website. By using weapons to make garden tools, we are creating a symbol for change, and we are asking you to participate, to dare to use our imaginations to change our impulse. Beating swords into plowshares, spears into pruning hooks, and guns into garden tools creates a dynamic shift in our investment in time and resources. If we are no longer training for war, what else would we be doing? It doesn't mean that we are all to become gardeners, but it does mean that we can invest in providing life-sustaining resources for our communities. So it is in this spirit that I turn towards Memorial Day, with respect for those who have died in the armed forces, and respect, too, for all who serve, and with a hope and a belief that some call naive, but I am no longer willing to consider impossible, that with equal investment in learning how to work through our many layered conflicts, there could come a time when this weekend is only about the cultural beginning of summer and all of its delights. For if we are no longer training for war, what else would we be doing? This is a thought experiment worthy of each name inscribed on plaques, commemorated in glass, and spoken aloud in remembrance.
Now comes the time in our service when we make an offering to support this self-supporting church and its many ministries. This is an important time to support our community. The last few years have been tough for us individually, but it has also been tough for the financial health of this important community. In so many ways, we are building back our community after our difficult pandemic and in recent days. Giving makes possible the many benefits that this wonderful community supports for each of us. This morning, we share our gifts with the House of Peace, whose mission is to provide physical and spiritual shelter to victims of war in a small, healing community, in companionship with adults with special needs, and to provide education for peace and moral awakening. Here are the different ways you can donate. Those in the sanctuary may give cash, checks, or donate electronically. Text to the number in your order of service or visit our website under the Giving page. If you are visiting for the first time, either in person or online, you are our guest. In-person attendees can find a physical visitor card in the pew racks in front of you. Please complete it and put it in the collection plate. Information about how to give online and how to complete the virtual visitor card will soon be shared with live stream attendees through text on your screen. The offering will now be generously given and gratefully received. Those who wish to do so are invited to join in the unison affirmation. We gather not for ourselves alone, but to use our common power to build the beloved community within and beyond these walls. We create and reaffirm this covenant this day to make justice flourish, to practice compassion amidst difference, and to embody transformative love. Rise in body, rise in spirit, to join in singing our closing hymn, number 161 in the gray hymnal, Peace, the perfect world is sounding. As we sing, the children will bring their wreath forward for the benediction.
I believe our young people are still caught in the creative process, so we will offer the benediction, and I will lead you out the Main Street door so all may use the ramp. Please do not forget to bring your orders of service with you. We close with these words by Frederick Gillis. May the love that overcomes all differences, that heals all wounds, that puts flight to all fears, that reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us, now and always. Amen.